Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Pereira. The Upper House of Parliament, Rajya Sabha, has been adjourned till March 2nd after the culmination of the first phase of the budget session. The second phase of Parliament's budget session will commence from March 2nd and will go on till April 3rd. In the first part of the session, President Ram Nath Kovind addressed a joint sitting of Parliament on January 31st, the first day of the session. The President's address was followed by the presentation of the Union Budget 2020 on February 1st in the Lok Sabha. Replying to the debate on her budget for 2020-21 in the Rajya Sabha on Tuesday, the Finance Minister said green shoots of recovery were visible with a rebound in industrial activity and GST collection crossing 1 lakh crore rupees mark in 6 months of the current fiscal. Earlier in the day, the Lok Sabha was also adjourned to meet again on March 2nd. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will take stock of the first phase of the budget session of Parliament. Joining me on the program today are K.V. Prasad, Senior Associate Editor of the Tribune, K.A. Badrinath, Senior Journalist, Aditi Phadnis, Political Editor of the Business Standard, and Chakshu Roy will be joining us in a short while from now. He is Head of Outreach, PRS Legislative Research. Thank you, Chakshu, for joining us on the program too. All right, thank you all of you for joining me on the program today. Let's take a look at the first half of the budget session 2020. Aditi, let me begin the program with you. How would you look back at the 9 sittings that we saw in the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha over the last few days?
Extremely eventful. For, I think, the wrong reasons, because I think this is the first budget speech that the Finance Minister was unable to read in full. In addition, I think there were a lot of issues which came up during the budget speech, and she was interrupted quite a lot. It was the longest budget speech ever. And before that, the President's address saw some interruptions on the controversial citizenship laws, both in place and proposed. So yeah, it was a pretty packed 9 sittings which have gone by.
K.V. Prasad, how would you reflect on the 9 sittings? Aditi is calling it very eventful, very, action-packed, really 9 sittings. How would you look back at the 9 sittings?
No, I think for a budget session, it was off to a fairly good start. The budget, of course, having presented the economic survey, the whole as per the schedule. And I think the primary focus of the government in the budget session obviously remains the financial agenda, because that's the focus. And the government, I think, has obviously, and the first and most important task which got done in both the houses was the President's address, motion of thanks to the President's address, wherein the government obviously comes up with the defense of the policies it has been come forward with, and the opposition. In fact, I think there are a record number of amendments, but I think the biggest advantage the government had is the opposition didn't really press for the amendments, and especially in the Rajya Sabha, where I think they had a walkout for whatever they had the contentious issues which they wanted to flag, and they did flag, and they left. I think that is where it stood. There were attempts to bring in some issues which the opposition thought should be discussed with more greater immediacy. I think that we will see probably come up with greater vigor in the second session after the recess, when the budgets get worked out in details in the standing committees.
Right, all right. And K. Badrinath, the highlight, of course, and something that everyone was looking forward to in the 9 sittings was on February 1st, the budget itself.
Yes.
And how would you look back at the budget and what is followed since the presentation of the budget on the economic side of it?
Yes, the session as such has been very productive. If you think about the debate that has happened on the President's speech, or the finance bill, or has not yet come in, but the first stage of the budget appropriations and things like that have completed yesterday and today, I guess, in Rajya Sabha. So my feeling is that like the last 2 sessions, this has also been a very productive session, and my guess is also that apart from the budget, where a huge package was about, you will have to spend about 30.8 lakh crores, and there is a huge sum that you are going to spend, And the biggest challenge, of course, despite what finance minister says about the GST collection and all that, my guess is still investment picking up is going to be a big challenge. And secondly, how the states are going to come along in implementing many of these schemes and projects is also going to be a big issue for the government, though it has got its agenda approved by the both the houses of parliament. There are 2-3 things I can point out. One is the big scheme that the finance minister had announced from Vivad Se Vishwas, which needs a separate bill that we were discussing right before the show. That has not been introduced, but it's part of the speech of the finance minister is in the House, and it's the property of the House now, and the House will have to decide how the scheme is going to be implemented from April 1, because many of the direct tax disputes which are there between the corporates and the income tax department or the individual taxpayer, more than about 8 lakh crores is locked in the dispute. So this can be unlocked in a big way. So, but that needs the approval of the parliament. A separate scheme needs to be drafted out, and that needs to be approved by the parliament. My guess is when either they would come up with some few amendments if required, or they will come up with a full bill when the House meets on March 2nd. Because you can get it approved before March 31st, when the scheme can begin on April 1. The second big, bill, I guess, is issue that was mentioned in the budget itself was, empowering the cooperative banks, empowering the Reserve Bank to take care of all the cooperative banks. And now all the cooperative banks will come under the purview of the Reserve Bank of India for the first time. After the PNC Bank scam, which has happened and many of the depositors were hit, now the cooperative banks will be under the care of Reserve Bank of India. Even in this regard, the 2 bills need to be introduced, which were earlier scheduled. And the 2 bills will be, one is to protect the interest of the depositors in the cooperative bank. Second is tightening the regulation for cooperative bank. These 2 bills also need to be cleared by both the houses of parliament, so that it gives effect to the announcements made by the finance minister in the budget.
All right.
So this is in effect. There are several other announcements made by the finance minister which needs to be supported by the bills. For example, you want to pick up some reserves, a part of your reserves. About $450 billion is your reserve. A part of it can be now invested in the funds which are not sovereign funds, maybe private funds and things like that abroad, or securities. Or you want to keep gold deposits outside the country to earn better. So this needs a supporting legislation and approval from the parliament, which perhaps will come in the second part of the session.
Okay. All right. We'll talk about what's likely to happen in the second part of the budget session 2020 in our next round. But let me get in Chakshu Roy into the picture as well. Chakshu, since you keep tracking what's happening in Parliament, since you follow everything very closely, what were the key highlights really of the first half?
Frank, I think, as all my co-panelists have said, that the first part of the budget session is usually to get the constitutional part of the things done. So the first constitutional requirement is the president's address. Then the 2 houses present a motion of thanks to that address. That has happened. The budget has been presented, and a general discussion on the budget has taken place. 3 bills have already been introduced. One is the tax bill that Mr. Badrinath was talking about. That's the Vivad Se Vishwas. Then there is an aircraft amendment bill, and there's another bill that's been introduced. And one
the
bill
Institute
today,
of Teaching and Research in Ayurveda Bill 2020
got passed in the Lok Sabha today. But now that this part of the session is over, a very important phase of our budget session begins, which is a 3-week recess. And this is the 3-week recess when, the different departmentally related standing committees will be examining the demand for grants of the various ministries. And the meat of the session now remains after these parliamentary committees examine the demand for grants of the different ministries. The appropriations will come up on the floor of the House. The two houses will discuss the demands, and the other house will discuss the working of the ministries. And let's not forget, there is a big legislative agenda also left for the 21 or the 22 odd days which are remaining for the session. I think there are more than 27 and 28 bills that have to be passed. Many of them have to be introduced, considered and passed during this time. Three things other than the three legislation, there were some parliamentary standing committees which have come out with the reports. So the report on the occupational safety bill has come in, and I think on the allied healthcare bill has also come in. And hopefully you will see a few more standing committee reports come in during the intersession period, which will then pave the way for these bills to be taken up during the second half of the session.
Right. Okay. Taking the point that Chakshu Roy is making forward, KV, I'd like to come to you, KV Prasad. So, as far as the recess period is concerned, take us through what exactly happens, what is the process that is followed? Because it's not like just because the parliament is not sitting, doesn't mean the MPs or the members are not working.
Yeah, actually, this is a process which began somewhere in the early 90s when I think Mr. Shiraj Patil was the speaker, and they decided that for better examination of the demands for grant, these standing committees would come into play and look at these demands for grant in a threadbare manner, go through it with a fine-tooth comb, so that members, particularly the people are called the secretaries of the ministries are concerned, they are to come and defend the budgets as to why they need the kind of grants they've asked for, so that there's an equitable distribution of the funds. That's one way of look at it, and better targeted to which look at the overall policies of the government. So members get to examine it, and committee work is always seen as a bipartisan approach or non-partisan, if one may say so, where it's away from the glare of what happens in the House. So people work together, and irrespective of party positions, they kind of look at this thing dispassionately and try to work out what's best for the people. Because remember, lakhs and crores of money is being spent, and only Parliament and the Lok Sabha is authorized to authorize the treasury benches to draw money from the Consolidated Fund and Treasury of India. So this is a very sacrosanct kind of a task that has to be undertaken. So that is the seriousness comes in. So next 3 weeks you will have different standing committees examining this. They already have the schedules drawn, so they will come up and examine. And once their report is presented, when the House reconvenes the session after the recess period, Parliament then discusses the demands for grants of certain set of ministries. It's a predetermined exercise. They kind of pick up the ministries they want to choose. While Lok Sabha is examining a certain set of documents, the Rajya Sabha, which does not have the financial powers, goes on to discuss the working of the ministries in other way, because they don't have the financial overreach. But then they kind of discuss other ministries, and eventually in a leaders meeting, they all decide to fix a day on a particular day when by 5:30 or 6 they'll say the guillotine applies, whereby all discussions that have held and not held, the budget will have to be passed.
Right.
That's right.
Okay.
In the standing committees, there's one issue that might be very important this time. I don't know if you see the budget, there is a proposal for quantum computing. It's a huge project that is going to be of big interest for India. This will come under the Science and Technology Ministry, which is going to vet the proposal in a big way. And this is where India is going to, for the first time, get into quantum computing. And the communication that we are seeing today, as it is like the TV networks that we are running now or anything, everything will be different once the quantum computing comes into action. And the security implications are huge. And China, United States, and Russia, Three of them are the big players in this market. And India getting into that league, trying to get into that league is a big issue. And maybe that quantum computing project is going to be dissected in a serious way by Science and Technology Ministry, to my mind.
I think that's a very valid point, and it's an important point to note,
Very
you know,
huge.
how serious we are really as far as taking up this particular issue is concerned, because we are already lagging behind if you look
Almost
at how...
10 years.
Yes.
In 2016, China launched a quantum satellite. And today, more than 7 cities in China are going to be connected by quantum communication. What they are lacking is only quantum computing. If that happens, you can never break into the Chinese network, leave alone even if you physically jump over the Great Wall of China.
Right.
So point here is, and most of the security networks world over will be most vulnerable and they can be hacked in no second.
Right.
So this is huge. It's like internet 4th generation or 10th generation. That is what is going to happen. Internet is going to be of no use after a few years, maybe in a decade or so.
Sure. And just to put things into perspective, you know, in the last year, as far as AI is concerned, I think the Chinese filed close to around 30,000 patents, and we filed, I think, about 3 patents as far as AI is concerned.
But
so
in
that
the
is
case
something...
of quantum computing, India has the largest number of research papers, third in the sequence, and we have done a lot of good research, research papers. But on the field, actual research has not happened in a big way, though there are assorted groups in IITs and IISc, Bangalore and all that.
Right, sure.
But
So
this will come under the mission.
Absolutely. That needs focus, and that needs clearly a lot of stress really going forward is what K. Badrinath is suggesting. But Aditi, at least let me come to you and look at the political side of everything that has happened really. You know, you spoke about how there was a lot of high octane energy on the floor of the House. The entire country witnessed that as well. You know, a lot of action really. Are we going to see more of that after the recess? And also, let's not forget, as far as the legislative agenda is concerned, 3 bills introduced in the Lok Sabha. One was passed as well, that is the Constitution Scheduled Tribes Order and Amendment Bill, which was passed in the Lok Sabha today. So how would you look at all of these aspects?
Well, of course, there's going to be a lot of energy, but the victory, today's victory, Aam Aadmi Party doesn't really... that resonance will not be there in the Lok Sabha because Aam Aadmi Party does not have that many MPs both in the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. So that's one part of it. But it's also true that the government has been defeated and others are going to make this, keep pointing it out. Plus, at the end of the year, there's another election in Bihar. So some preparation politically on the floor of the House will be seen in that direction. There are 2 or 3 things which are going to happen outside Parliament which will possibly affect Parliament if they happen before the next session. And one of them is a reshuffle. We are expecting a reshuffle to take place, and if that happens before the next session, then that will be a big event. You'll see a different faces sitting there. Also, between now and the next session will be the India visit of President Donald Trump. And that is also going to be capitalized upon by the government quite naturally because, the most powerful man in the world is coming to India, has chosen to come to India. He is going to be re-elected. It's very clear now. The impeachment bid has failed. And I know that a great deal of midnight oil is being expended to reach an interim trade deal. Which may or may not fructify, but the fact is a lot of preparation is going into it.
Efforts are being made.
So, whatever the downside of economic management will be made up by the excitement and the anxiety and the sense of anticipation surrounding Mr. Trump's visit.
Okay, all right. Chakshu, so when the House reconvenes again on March 2nd, what is the course of business? What is it that they will be taking up? What is it that is going to be followed?
Frank, the first course of business will obviously be to get the financial business done and approved with. So as Prasad sir, very eloquently pointed out, the appropriations and the demands will get discussed. Both the houses will discuss them in their respective capacities. I just want to add one parliamentary interesting aspect. Prasad sir also mentioned guillotine. The demands which don't get discussed will be guillotine. Till the 15th, till the end of the 14th Lok Sabha, what used to happen was that when the demands were guillotined, members were not able to put cut motions on the demands that were getting guillotined. But in the 15th Lok Sabha, one of the things that was changed was that the right of members, the constitutional right of members to put cut motions even on demands that are getting guillotined was recognized. So even if demands are getting guillotined now, members will be able to put cut motions. To give you a sense of what is the percentage of budget that will get discussed, during the previous Lok Sabha, which was the 16th Lok Sabha, I just added up the numbers of demands that was discussed on the floor of the House. So it constituted about 17 to 18% of our total budget. So that is the amount of demands that get discussed for 5 or 6 big ministries, and the rest of it gets guillotined. I also wanted to add a little bit to what Aditi ma'am was saying. Another possibly parliamentary activity that will happen post this session will be the retirement of a large number of Rajya Sabha MPs. I was looking at some numbers, and I think either Prasad sir or Badri sir or Aditi ma'am can correct me, but I think close to 65 to 70 Rajya Sabha members are due to retire over the course of the year. A majority of them coming in April and after that. So there's going to be a little bit of churn in the composition of Rajya Sabha, which will also affect the way legislative business gets transacted in the upper house.
Okay, all right. Aditi ma'am puts the number at 80. So that's the number really as
Till
far
the
as
end of the year.
Yeah, at the end of the year. 80 till the end of the year. Okay, all right. Time to get concluding remarks now from all the panelists on what we've seen in the first half and what to expect in the second half as well. Starting first with you, Mr. Prasad.
Well, I think the priority, of course, remains financial agenda that the government needs to get out. And if any other business, if it can transact in terms of legislative, it should be treated as bonus. That's my assessment.
Okay, Ms. Aditi Fadnis.
Well, what happens outside Parliament naturally has an impact on what happens in Parliament. So I'll be very curious to know how the passage of the budget, of the remainder of the budget, whatever it is, and other debates are impacted by the election which has just completed in Delhi.
So how much of a bearing do you think it's going to have?
Hard to say. The mood is obviously impacted, but because as Aam Aadmi Party has very few MPs, and because the Congress has been dealt with as summarily as the BJP, it's possible that everyone will want to keep a lid on the discussions. But still, it's an important election, and I'm sure there will be some reverberations in the both houses.
Okay, all right. Mr. Badrinath?
In the second half, I foresee two things happening. One is, if I recall, the legislative agenda that was approved by the Cabinet Committee on Parliamentary Affairs, there were 12 bills to be introduced. Only 2 or 3 have been introduced now. So you need at least 9 more bills that need to be cleared. In that, there are 2 significant bills, at least from the financial sector perspective. Decriminalizing some of the offences made by companies or companies' chief executives. You cannot try them under criminal proceedings. That is one bill where Companies Act needs to be amended, which will come perhaps. This will add to perhaps positive mood of the corporate sector. Second part, if I recall, is the changes to the structure of the Competition Commission, which needs to be undertaken, and there is a bill pending already, and which needs to be discussed by both the houses of the Parliament. The Competition Commission needs to be revamped in a way to suit the today's present conditions with both foreign investors and the companies, the domestic investors, PSUs, cooperators becoming major players. So Competition Commission needs to be revamped. There is a bill that is going to come up. Apart from the other bills that will come up, supporting the proposals mooted by the finance minister in the budget. Second part is, my gut feeling is that whatever may be the political developments outside, including AAP getting the good majority in Delhi, sweeping back to power and all that, it may have a sobering impact at a mental level, but as of the parliament business, it may not have too much of a material impact as such. And I guess even the realignment of any political forces or anything during the recess time or during the next session may not take off or any such thing happening. I don't see any such thing.
Okay, all right. And Chakshu Roy, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
Frank, I hope and wish that now that the political season is over, seriousness would get back to Parliament and we'd see more rigorous both legislative and financial deliberations on the floor of the House for the remaining days of the session.
Okay, all right. On that note, then we'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's it from me. See you again next time.